I had a garden at one time, and I have to admit that I didn't put enough effort into it to make it work. I think it was all that weeding and the mosquitoes. But I will tell you what, nothing tastes better than the stuff you can eat right out of your garden. That I do miss. One thing I learned in my gardening experience was that seeds need the right conditions to start growing. Different seeds need different conditions. And if the conditions continue to be favorable, then the plant keeps growing until hopefully it bears fruit. But conditions are not favorable everywhere, are they? One of the fastest growing ecological systems on the planet are the hot deserts, which are not the best places for growing much. And as some of you may know, we had an issue with the hard-packed ground around here when we built the church. So some people who know about these things planted radishes to break up the soil and make it more hospitable for other plants. You know, one thing that's always fascinated me was the tree growing out of the side of a cliff or the plant growing right up in the middle of a sidewalk. It would seem that those places would not have ideal conditions for a plant to grow. Yet somehow it manages to sprout, and we know not how, as Jesus says in the gospel. There's apparently just enough of what the seed needs in those seemingly hard, desolate places for the plant to grow. It reminds me of St. Teresa of Calcutta, or Mother Teresa as we know her. She went to a hard, desolate place and planted a seed. And like that seed in the sidewalk, it had just enough of what it needed to grow because she provided it. It was watered with her love and compassion. She offered those whom society rejected and cast out some comfort and dignity in their last days of life. She did it so well that we've heard of her all the way over here in this small little town of Elburn. Her efforts had global impact. Why? Well, it made people think about how we ought to treat others. And all she did was plant a little seed that allowed people to experience that kingdom of God that Jesus speaks about in the gospel. The beautiful thing about this kingdom is that where we find it, we find the King in all that he is. And what is he? Love, compassion, mercy, justice, truth, life, health, purpose, dignity, beauty, hope. These are all things that go where the King goes because they are a part of who he is, part of his nature. You know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the fastest growing ecological systems are the hot deserts. Have you ever been to the desert? I visited Arizona a few years ago, and for a guy used to living in this area full of vibrant green fields, it was very different. The dry, arid landscape seemed devoid of life for the most part. It wasn't, of course. It's just it wasn't as prevalent as it is here. It kind of reminds me of the state of Christianity in this country. Like the hot desert, the faith desert is growing. So many of our brothers and sisters have traded in the vibrant, lush green of the kingdom for the dry, flammable scrub brush of secular humanism. Some of those folks may still believe there's a God, but they don't feel the need for any sort of organized religion. They might say God is everywhere. We can pray anytime we want to, so we don't need a church. Well, it's certainly true. God is everywhere, and we can pray anytime we want to, and we should. But consider this. Water is everywhere, in the air around us, but we still have to go to the well to drink, or we're going to die of thirst. This church is that well. It's where we find God, not just out there somewhere as some sort of vague notion, but really and substantially present in the Eucharist and in his word. This is the place to sink our roots deep into the life-giving waters of our baptism. It's the foundation of the kingdom because it's where we find the King. You know, there are efforts around the world in places like the Sahara and all over Israel to try to hold back the advancing deserts. How are they doing that? By planting seeds, and then by watering them and making conditions right for them to grow. That, folks, is what we must do. This parish needs to become a whole community garden full of vibrant plants that bear fruit, an oasis in the desert, if you will. Fruit like that of Mother Teresa. Like her, we need to bring the King and all that he is into first our families, and then into our jobs and into the wider community. We as a community and personally need to be that mustard plant that we hear about in the gospel, the place where people go to find shade from the searing heat of the desert out there. We can't hold back that desert, but like growing a garden, it's going to take some effort. And it may be uncomfortable, but we weren't made for comfort. We were made to walk by faith and not by sight, as Paul tells us. We need to look for opportunities to water the seeds of faith in us. Okay, so here's just such an opportunity that might fit the uncomfortable category. Husbands, I want you to try this today if you don't already do it. At some point, I want you to hold your wife in your arms and pray out loud. It doesn't have to be long or eloquent. And if you're the kind of guy that can just open his mouth and it flows out, then great. If you aren't, then think about what you're going to say before you start, but don't use that as an excuse to not do it. If you're not sure what to say, just thank God for all that you have. Your house, your job, your kids, your hair if you still have it. Ask God for the things you need to keep your kids safe, to help you be better parents, to be better coworkers, to be better Catholics. Pray for your wife and invite God deeper into your marriage. Then do it every day. It's a small thing, like that mustard seed. But if we keep at it, keep coming to church, keep praying with our families, then we will be doing our part to help the kingdom grow.